Okay, I said I wanted to pick up with the Hoffling study in 1966. This is a disturbing one, and if you watched the video and paid close attention, they actually referred to this study, I think, towards the end. But what they did was they asked two groups of nurses. Well, no, they had two groups of nurses. One of the groups, they asked, what would you do if a doctor called, if you received a call by an unknown physician and you were ordered to administer an obvious drug overdose? The group that was asked that, what would you do if this happened? And nearly all said they wouldn't have followed the order. They had another group of nurses to whom they actually did this. They called, it was an anonymous physician, an unknown physician, who told them they needed to administer this lethal dose. They didn't say this lethal dose, but the nurses knew it was a lethal dose of the drug. And all but one obeyed without delay. All but one went. Now they didn't actually administer the dose, but the criteria was, did they prepare it and go as if they were going to administer? All but one, though the other group had said, of course not, we would stand up. Pretty frightening. Okay. Next, Milgram wanted to see what would happen if he took away what he called the institutional authority. Are people more likely to conform when the research is being done at Yale versus some kind of shabby office building in Bridgeport? And what we found is, yes, conformity did drop, although we're still close to 50% of the individuals went all the way to 450 volts. So while the experiment being done on Yale's campus did make a difference, we still see close to half, even in some office building with no institutional authority. So, what makes all the difference here? What would happen if Milgram had started with 330 volts and you hear these screams of pain the first time? We can imagine that a lot of people would stop at that point. But what he did was start where they were administered 15 shocks before they hear they're administered 5 shocks before they hear the first mention of pain. By the time they get to 330 volts, they had complied with the experimenter 22 times. What did we see them do? Make excuses, reduce that cognitive dissonance. How do we go about increasing disobedience, or we should say lowering obedience? One of the things Milgram found was that the earlier a subject said, I'm not comfortable with this, the more likely they were to end it. And so the earlier the opposition was made, the more likely they were to drop out. Another one was the people who felt personally responsible. If an individual felt personally responsible for the well-being of the learner, they were more likely to drop out and not go all the way to 450 volts. If you watch the original documentary that I posted, when we get to the third guy, and I think he's certainly the most interesting one, he at one point says, do you assume responsibility if something happens to this guy? The experimenter says, yes, I do. And the guy went on. So obviously he did not have any personal responsibility. So, good old Stanley Milgram leave us with these words. Ordinary people simply doing their jobs and without any particular hostility on their part can become agents in a terrible, destructive process. Lots of interesting stuff to think about, and as I've said many times, I want this class to change how you think and change how you act in different situations. And I think if we keep the Stanley Milgram experiment in our minds, it can hopefully make a difference down the road.